Well, good morning. Our city faced challenges throughout 2020. Until last year, we'd begun to see more reasons for optimism. A 21% decline in violent crime, a 12% overall decline in crime generally. The first year that we had a year-over-year decrease in homicides in nearly a decade. But then came 2020. And while overall crime has continued to fall, criminal homicide skyrocketed. To a degree, that figure aligns with national trends. 2020 saw the worst one-year increase for homicides across all of the country. And while that in no way excuses or diminishes even one killing in our city, we must seek to know why this is happening to better combat this deadly violence. Clearly, COVID is a contributing factor. It has put mental, emotional, economic strain on residents across our city, especially those who were struggling before the pandemic. And it has interrupted key violence intervention practices. But the pandemic alone cannot account for every killing in our city. Chief Taylor and members of his command staff, as well as our Community Violence Reduction Director, Shauna Majors, will be up in a moment to go into further detail about local trends and our plans for this year to combat deadly crime in Indianapolis. As our approach to public health and the environment surrounding public health rapidly evolves, so does our approach to public safety. One thing, however, has been constant: our commitment to a safer city and a better police-community relationship. To that end, you will hear updates around our partnership with the NYU School of Law Criminal Justice Lab, a partnership we announced last May to help reimagine policing in Indianapolis. You'll also hear the latest around our body-worn camera program. You'll hear the latest around officer staffing levels, community engagement, and community violence intervention. You'll hear about our mental health campaign for the COVID era, as well as updates on new strategies meant to tackle the root causes of violent crime. So let me finish with this. Our city is fighting a battle on many fronts right now. There's no doubt about that. And it's tough. But I assure you, behind that fight are dedicated men and dedicated women who love this city, who are willing to put their life on the line, and they are working hard to make this city even better. And we will not stop collectively. We will not stop until we succeed. So with that, let me hand it over to Chief Taylor to get things started. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. In this unprecedented time, we have not been immune from the troubling trend that has impacted cities across the United States. We are seeing more and more people who are turning to violence when confronted with conflict. We know our community is frustrated and disappointed with the level of violence we have seen in our city this year. Our officers are frustrated and disappointed as well. Any incidents of violence in our city is one too many, and we grieve with all the families who have been impacted by the recent violence. Throughout 2020, even as most of our residents hunkered down at the height of the pandemic, the men and women of this agency have remained steadfast in their commitment to helping keep the residents safe. We have initiatives. We have ramped up staffing in local, state, and federal partnerships focused on addressing violent crimes such as the Crime Gun Intelligence Center, an innovative collaboration that focuses on identifying and holding accountable trigger pullers and removing crime guns from our community. We have doubled down on community-based beat policing, expanding our model to shrink the geographic area the officers are responsible for, allowing neighbors to better know the officers who serve them and foster stronger police community partnerships, proactively reducing violence. During a time when budgets are stretched especially thin, the city has not only maintained but increased the resources targeted at preventing and reducing violence, from OPHS partnership with the DVN to fund safe housing for survivors of domestic violence, to the grant programs focused on community-based violence prevention, to ongoing victims and witness assistance programs. As we have discussed with the City County Council over recent weeks, we are working with Health and Hospital Corporation to increase the capacity of our behavioral health services model, which pairs a crisis intervention trained officer with a mental health clinician to respond to the needs of residents experiencing acute mental emotional crises. Our officers will continue to work to hold people who commit violence accountable. But we also want residents to know your life is worth more than that. Your neighbor's life is worth more than that. Please walk away instead of doing something that will fundamentally change your future. We as IMPD need your help in solving these dangerous crimes being committed in Indianapolis. We ask anyone with information about violent acts committed in our city to call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 317-262-TIPS, TIPS. And with that, I will pass it on to Deputy Chief Josh Barker of Operations.
Morning, everybody. Later in the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to outline some of our strategies moving into 2021 to address the crime and disorder in our city. But first, please allow me to provide sort of a high-level overview on some of our preliminary statistics from crime in 2020, as well as a progress report on a couple of key initiatives that the police department is currently working under. So if we can go to slide 3, we'll begin there. So this slide represents just the preliminary overall crime data, broken down into the usual categories of overall violent, property, and then just combined overall crime numbers. As you can see, a small but promising decrease in the overall crime from 19 to 20. And please understand, we'll get into more specifics here in just a few slides, notwithstanding what everybody recognizes is an unacceptable level of non-fatal shootings and homicides that occurred in 2020. It's still important for us to provide an update on the other crime categories. Property crime, just over an 11% decrease, and then combined, we're looking at just under an overall 9% decrease in the overall crime. We'll look at property crime first. Some promising numbers, but also some numbers that show we still have some work to do. That we're over 25% reduction in burglary and nearly a 20% reduction in larceny. Very promising. Did see a slight uptick in the vehicle theft. And then as you can see, just over a 14% increase in arson. Moving to the violent crime data, the chief and the mayor talked about at the beginning of the presentation. what our nation has experienced with an across-the-board increase in gun crime and violent crime associated with firearms. As you can see, and we've all discussed at length over the past year, Indianapolis was not untouched by some of that violence. 39% increase in homicides last year over 2019, with a 4.5% increase in aggravated assault. What is promising, and I believe is a direct result of some of the proactive initiatives we've put in place to deal with some of these street robberies and serial robberies, is a 15% reduction in robberies in the city. And then, as you can see, 15% reduction in rape as well. Here's just a sort of a statistical representation on a bar diagram of the overall homicides over the past 5 years. From 2018 to 2019, if you recall, we had a slight reduction, but a reduction nonetheless. Then as we experienced a year of firsts as a community and police department and profession, unfortunately, we saw those numbers rise in 2020. Upon review of the preliminary non-fatal shooting data, you can see that it's broken down into incidents and victims. So just so that everybody's clear, it's a 41% increase in the number of non-fatal shooting incidents. That's the incident itself. But as equally alarming is the fact that we also had a 36% increase in the number of victims of non-fatal shootings. And that number comes from non-fatal shootings that involved multiple victims on a single incident. Many of you have heard me discuss the update on downtown public safety initiatives in the past, but I think it's absolutely critical to provide a progress report on some of the things that were put into place last year with regards to the downtown safety. We obviously recognize that the COVID pandemic drove our traditional workforce to work from home, which created quite a vacuum in the downtown area. This led to a number of adjustments that needed to be made to ensure that we were keeping our strategy aligned with everything we could do to ensure the downtown public safety. Some of those issues were exacerbated by the civil unrest and rioting we saw in May. But I'm happy to report that we have made a great deal of headway in the wake of those riots to increase the public safety initiatives in the downtown area. Working closely with the city and the mayor's office, if you recall, last August, $750,000 were allocated to downtown recovery efforts. And in cooperation with Downtown Indy Inc., IMPD has worked to increase the foot and bike patrols of the off-duty officers. We have participated extensively in the Safety Ambassador Program. Those are 4 civilians and 4 and a collection of IMPD cadets that are helping downtown patrons, business owners, and most importantly, as we see a return of the convention and sporting business visitors into downtown Indianapolis. So IMPD is helping to staff that mission, as well as we developed and put on the training for those civilian and cadet safety ambassadors last year. Also of note is a quick progress report on the IMPD's rollout of the B-Link program. To date, since August, we've had 16 new businesses sign up to integrate their business cameras with IMPD's Incident Analysis Center through the B-Link program, which is facilitated in partnership with the Indy Public Safety Foundation. Those 16 businesses have given us an additional 45 street-level camera views that are now integrated into IMPD's network, which is absolutely crucial as we continue to grow our situational awareness through the presence of video capability in the downtown area. Moving forward, we have between 15 and 20 businesses still that are in the queue to get signed up and participate in the B-Link program, with the potential for an additional 40 to 50 camera views yet to come online. And then we also continue to use our mobile trailer cams that we can position in crime hotspots throughout the city, including downtown Indianapolis. Moving on to body-worn cameras. I'm really proud of the men and women of this police department for quickly rolling out what is a significant shift in the day-to-day operations, specifically of the patrol division, with the rollout of body-worn cameras. To date, just over 1,000 body-worn cameras have been issued to our officers. You can see the breakdown of assignments there. Right now, we're currently working with utility to get the second round of body-worn cameras pushed out to our folks and get those installations complete. That will add an additional capability of 270 body-worn cameras for the uniform, as well as integrating 25 new in-car dash camera videos that all integrate into the same body-worn system. And there's a link provided on the slide for more information on the body-worn camera program. This slide is important as we move forward into 2021 and continue to think about reimagining law enforcement and ensuring that we are following best practices with the expectation of our community while taking into account a variety of complex issues that are facing law enforcement. Our behavioral health unit, which was established in 2016, continues to yield high returns on our investment. And I couldn't be more proud of the work they do on a day-to-day basis. Just a quick statistical breakdown. This small group of officers has followed up in partnership with our mental health and substance abuse counselors from Eskenazi on over 3,500 immediate detentions, nearly 1,000 referrals, over 1,000 home visits. They are fielding phone calls with individuals on a daily basis to help them navigate, whatever individual crises they are facing. And in 2021, we are committed to continuing that work with the Health and Hospital Corporation in partnership with Eskenazi to expand the impact of BHU. And Chief Bailey is going to talk about that here in just a bit. I think it's important to note one statistic that is not captured, and it's very difficult, to show any tangible numbers around that. But one of the reasons that BHU is so effective in our mission to be community police officers is their referral process, and the work that they're doing behind the scenes allows our police officers to stay in service, to be more responsive to the 911 calls and proactive enforcement strategies that we are working to deploy to try to impact that violent crime. And again, so not only are we freeing up the officers' time, but we're also redirecting folks that are in crisis from having to participate in traditional criminal justice system, and we're able to redirect those folks in a more meaningful, impactful way to get them the help that they need. It's now I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce a great friend to IMPD and the Director of Community Violence Reduction, Shauna Majors.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you, Chief Barker. I appreciate it. I want to start my component here with the mental health campaign. This is a campaign the mayor's office did a couple of campaigns this year to raise awareness, and this one specifically is about mental health. Chief Barker just finished talking about the importance of that. The City County Council, shout out to Mike Hart for leading this effort, partnered to raise awareness for mental health resources during COVID-19. This has been an unprecedented year, 2020, for our community and the world. And so it has taken quite a toll on everyone's mental health. And so this campaign is specifically targeted at Black and Brown residents who were most affected by the pandemic. And this campaign will continue to run through January 22nd. And then there's more information to connect with those resources on the website at indy.gov/coping with COVID. This was funded by the CARES Act, and we have several several billboards and print ads, radio commercials to try to get this information out to the community, to let people know that there is help available and it's okay to not be okay, but please reach out for help so that we can get through this time together. So the next slide. I want to start by acknowledging the work that goes into this gun violence reduction strategy that I'm about to talk about. First and foremost, this work is extremely difficult and it takes a lot of heart to do this work. I want to quickly shout out this work has taken 2 major losses in the last week. Locally here with our loss of our friend, Mr. Johnny Purchase. He was doing street outreach, community engagement, and his life was taken. And across the country, a good colleague of mine, Tater Barksdale, was in Baltimore, Maryland. He was the head of the Safe Street Initiative there, and his life was taken this week doing the same work. So I just wanted to pay respects to those 2 individuals, and we really appreciate their work, and our heart and thoughts go out to their families. So this year, the Office of Public Health and Safety, we adapted and completed a collaborative gun violence reduction strategy, or GVRS, as I'll say moving forward, to really address the root causes and treat trauma and reduce the amount of violent homicides and non-fatal shootings in our city. This is an evidence-based practice and strategy. We utilize assistance from National Institute on Criminal Justice Reform. This model contains elements from Operation Ceasefire and Cure Violence model and has been tailored to address the unique needs and trends found in the city of Indianapolis. We have several partner agencies that work on this strategy, to include law enforcement, the mayor's office, government, OPHS, the community, and various businesses and community-based organizations. Our strategy contains several components, as you see here on this slide, and I will get into a few of those as we go through the presentation. This work really focuses on prevention, intervention, interruption, healing, living, and success. And as you see by the big circle, how all of that fits in together to make this a strong, comprehensive gun violence reduction strategy. Next slide. Prevention. So in the vein of prevention, the work is ongoing. It begins at early stages of development, focusing on culture and norms and attitudes and what's acceptable in our society. But during this time in 2020, a lot of things were uncertain and people were very tense and stressed about everything going on. So our team jumped in along with other partners, and I won't list them all right here today, but doing food distributions. We served over 10,000 families during the immediate onset starting in March of 2020, where we convened community partners to hand out food and hygiene items. We did masks, hand sanitizers all over the city to provide basic needs. Our thinking behind that was, if we can try to address the basic needs of our community, then maybe perhaps we can help reduce some of the other violent crimes or the other crimes such as, burglaries, robberies, things of that nature. And then, of course, we kept with our Safe Summer initiative. This summer, we had 3 locations that were open Friday nights from 7 to 10. And we will continue to do this for this year as well. So if anyone would like to be involved, please get a hold of me to volunteer. But we really wanted to provide a safe environment for our 13 to 18-year-olds to have somewhere to go, safe on a Friday night, 7 to 10 p.m. We were able to serve over 462 youth during that time period. And we also continued our Safe Saturday nights by going down to the high volume areas in downtown, such as the Canal and Circle Center Mall, between 8:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. on Saturday nights. And then the last thing I'll highlight in the prevention area is our Street Lights Are On initiative. This was a really cool initiative that came from the community that we, partnered with immediately to just give a kind of a, I don't know if you guys remember that commercial, it's 11 o'clock, do you know where your children are? That's kind of the idea of Safe Street Initiative for parents and coaches and mentors and whomever touch our young people to check in on them during those high opportune times where things usually start happening after dark, and check on them and encourage them to make good choices while they're out. So I'll go on to the next slide to talk about intervention. The intervention work is critical to transformation of the people that we're trying to reach. And I don't know if you all are aware, but we go to the hardest to serve areas in our city, and we engage with the people that are known as shooters or very close to the shooters. And so it's critical to be able to provide these interventions, to provide resources, to remove barriers, and the stigma of needing help from someone else. We've developed an amazing network of community partners to assist in providing these services to the people that we are touching. This year, CICF stepped up to partner with us to streamline the organizations that are selected to provide these wraparound services based on their past performance. So we have 26 organizations that will be utilized to wrap around the people that we bring in for transformative services. I want to also talk about the other major campaign that the mayor's office participated in this year, and that is the domestic violence campaign. During this time of COVID, where resources have been limited, schools are not open, people been working from home, we have definitely seen an uptick in our domestic violence incidents. And so through the CARES Act funding, we were able to place 22 survivors, 24 children, and 4 dogs in emergency hotel shelter. And we created this because a lot of the shelters weren't taking people due to COVID. And so we had to have a place for our people to go that were experiencing domestic violence in their homes. And so this became a top priority. And I'm very thankful for the partners that help with this. And we continue to do the work. We've invested in some billboard campaigns, and some Facebook ads, and we worked with some of our media partners to get that message out. And that's been very helpful with getting people engaged in getting help for domestic violence. Next slide. So this slide is a look at the types of interventions that our team provides. I'm going to break through them very quickly. Customized notifications, call-ins or community safety meetings, or group violence intervention, that we're transforming that language, and then referrals that we receive from our Impd partners or our community partners. Customized notifications, as you can see, went up in 2020. We did most of those because due to COVID, our work was hampered a bit with having the group call-ins that we were having in 2019. So we had to kind of pivot and do some more one-on-one touches with the community. And then, as you can see in the second column, the call-ins, that number did decrease due to the fact that we couldn't bring everybody together in one place. Since then, though, we have adapted a hybrid model that we will continue to use moving forward this year, where we have some of our participants in person and some online. And these participants are the hardest to reach and the ones that need our help the most, that no one else is reaching out to touch for services because of the type of lifestyle that they live. Lastly, the referrals. We saw a slight, about 50% decrease in the referrals that we received. That's due to schools being closed. We had a lot of our referrals from schools in the previous year, and a lot of community members. So we look forward to moving this work forward with the interventions and continue to do that work moving forward in this year. You can go ahead to the next slide. Interruption. This is a two-part addition to the work that we've been doing. And I just want to go through that briefly with you. This level of work becomes dangerous and requires credible messengers. There are people that we want to reach out to that not just anyone can walk up to their door and talk to them. The credible messengers or the interrupters are utilized to break violent cycles. They attack cyclical or retaliation violence. We have a lot of people with emotional responses to conflict. And so we want to continue that, working with the families, the victims. When we learn of retaliation, we move quickly into trying to quell that retaliation from spreading further violence. We've been able to partner with the Public Safety Foundation, and they will provide salary and accountability for the street level interruptions, as well as 2 other additional implementations that we've done this year. My staff has been participating with weekly shooting reviews with Impd to look at the week in review of what shootings occurred, to include non-fatal shootings, to see where we can jump in and prevent further violence, and or assist the family with victim services. And then the last part here I'll add is the case conferencing meetings that we have stepped up, where we will meet with interrupters, and the interventionist working in this work together on a weekly basis at minimum, to coordinate our efforts to make sure that we are moving as a unit to assist people, moving them from that high risk category of gun violence into a fellowship that we would like to name in the honor of Mr. Johnny Purchase, and that is our Johnny Purchase Peace Fellowship. Each interrupter that works with our peacemakers will and have been receiving training. We went out to Oakland later last year to learn from the people on the ground doing the work and put kind of what we've been learning all along to practice. So that's my very brief overview of the changes and the additions to the work. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Thank you. And I don't know who's next. Hi, so I want to now introduce my good friend, Assistant Chief Christopher Bailey, to take over for the 2021 priorities for Impd. Sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. You've heard from Chief Barker about what we saw in 2020, and Chief Taylor, all the great work being done by Ms. Majors and her team. And now we're going to talk a little bit about, in broad, 30,000 feet level priorities for Impd. And it's basically 9 broad categories that our police department is going to focus on in 2021. First being accountability, both internal and external, data, technology, use of force, an inclusive crime reduction strategy, hiring, recruitment, and retainment, engagement, and behavioral health and wellness. The first one here, accountability, both internally and externally, is going to require some changes from within, but also some technology, which we'll talk about here in the future. But external accountability is our accountability to the community. Several police reform actions were taken by Chief Taylor and the mayor late last year, including a use of force review board that includes the majority citizens involvement, a general orders board created by the City County Council, which is also a civilian majority led. Currently, the Impd Civilian Merit Board is engaged in looking at our disciplinary matrix and a disciplinary process to make sure that it's fair for both our officers and the community. When it comes to data, it's no secret that data has been an issue for our police department for some time. While we've made some significant strides forward, we still have some work to do. We want to improve our data collection both internally so that we know where to guide our officers in the certain times and places and who the people are that are committing violent crime. But externally, we want to make sure that we're transparent, so that we're sharing use of force data, that we're sharing complaint data, and that we're sharing crime data that communities can look at and drill down in and see what's going on in their neighborhood. But in order to do that, we have to improve our technology. One of the ways we do that one of the ways we're going to do that is to gather information from the community in this continuous feedback loop. That's going to require us to continuously survey our community down to the street level, exactly what crime issues they're facing in their community, what their perception of crime is, and what crime they want their police department to go after in the community. It's easy for us to just guess what the issues are facing community from a crime level, but it's important for us to drill down and ask the individuals living in the neighborhoods that are most impacted what exactly they want from their police department. We need a situational awareness tool, real-time tool that allows our commanders and our officers to know at any given minute where crime is occurring, what time it's occurring, what type of crime it is, and where they should be in order to try to deter that criminal activity from happening in the first place. Next slide, please. Training is important. Law enforcement profession is always changing, and we have to keep up with community expectations. That puts a huge burden on our training academy. So within the next several months, we're going to engage the Police Executive Research Forum, utilize their ICAT training, which is a focus, which is a great program that departments across the country have seen tremendous amounts of success with. It focuses on those non-armed confrontations that our officers face more than most. Provides training on decision making, allows officers to take the time if they can to understand what's happening, get the proper resources available to them to the scene without having to use deadly force. It's a great model. Once COVID restrictions kind of ease up and they can begin training, that's what we want to try to integrate more into our training academy, but also with our incumbent training and in-service training that we have every year. We're going to continue to build on our de-escalation training, procedural justice training, and we do that by doing more scenario-based training, both for our incumbents and for our recruits. That's going to be important as we move into 2021 and beyond. Use of force, you saw earlier in the year that use of force policy was developed in coordination with shareholders from the community, and inside the police department, and engagement with the union. We believe we have a great policy that meets nationwide standards and community standards that includes proportionate force and a duty to intervene and a prohibition on chokeholds. Now, use of force policies are not something that just you do once and then you forget about them. The reason why it's a priority for us is because we're going to continue to engage the community, our new General Orders Board, and other partners to make sure that our policy is robust and meets 21st century policing standards. The one that I think that's going to help us turn the corner on our violent crime deals with having a robust violent crime reduction strategy. And we do that by engaging with our community for input to find out exactly what it is they want from the police department, where they want us to be. We have to continue to be focused and laser focused on the small number of people, places, and behaviors that are responsible for majority of the crime. We know that through intelligence, through community tips, and through data. And so we have to continue to use that model and help use that to guide our actions. The Crime Gun Intelligence Center is a great example of how that works appropriately. And as we engage the community, we're going to understand what their problems are, and we can work with them the community to help solve those problems using not only our resources as a law enforcement agency, but all the enterprises resources to try to improve the quality of life in those neighborhoods. Directed patrols. Having our officers in our beats, is important, but having our officers in the beats in the right places in those beats at the right time is also important. So we have to do some, in conjunction with NYU, we're looking at the type of runs we take, how we take them, in order to free up our officers' time so they can spend more time in the neighborhoods doing directed patrols. What do I mean by directed patrols? Doesn't mean traffic stops or investigative stops necessarily. It's community engagement, it's being present, it's walking, it's talking, it's dealing with the issues that the community identifies and having the dedicated time to do so. Part of our reorganization is going to be increased investigative and preventative resources at the district level. So we know we have proactive teams now, flex teams on the districts, Northwest specifically, and East District, where most of our violent crime occurs. We have to provide them more resources in order to deal with those violent crime issues that they're facing. And we also have to reprioritize our district narcotics and flex teams and community resources to be laser focused on the most important violent targets that we have in our beats and in our districts. Obviously, in order to staff our department appropriately, we have to continue to hire. Thanks to the City County Council and the mayor, we have a fully funded budget for 1,743 officers. I'm confident that we're going to reach that number, even if it's for just a brief moment in 2021. Currently, our staffing number is set at 1,650. We'll be adding 78 recruits on the 25th of December. That'll take us over 1,700, getting us closer to our cap of 1,743. We continue to have a robust recruiting effort, and we'll hire another class in 2021 that will get us to our 1,743 number. And I've mentioned this several times, we have to continue to have robust engagement, not only with our partners in OPHS, but with our community and with our local, state, and federal partners. Over the next couple of weeks, each of our service districts will host a virtual community meeting so that you can hear from our commanders on what their specific crime reduction plans are for each of the districts. And also will be an opportunity for us to hear the concerns of the community and then tailor our responses to what their needs are. And finally, and not any less important than all the other things we've said in our priorities, is continuing to build upon our behavioral health unit, our MCAT unit, and providing good quality wellness care to our officers. And so our plan is to add 2 additional MCAT teams to serve parts of the community that currently aren't being serviced by the MCAT teams now. We hope to do that in the early second quarter of 2021. We want to work with OPHS and our friends at the Marion County Sheriff's Office to try to identify funding and money to put a clinician or multiple clinicians in the 911 center to help triage 911 calls so that our officers aren't dispatched to a person in crisis run when they don't need to be. If we can divert that run to an MCAT person, to a behavioral health specialist, or even defer them to someone outside of the city for assistance, that's what we want to do to try to reduce those number of interactions between our cops and the community. And then, most people don't know that we built a great partnership with a company called Pro Team Tactical. Both us and the fire department have areas designated where if our officers are injured in the line of duty, they can go to this facility and be treated as if they are an athlete, to get immediate care for their musculoskeletal injuries, which are the most common in our police department, allows them to recover quicker, allows them to get back to work quicker, and it will eventually reduce costs to the citizens of Indianapolis. And we want to build on that partnership to take into account more physical health and mental health, so that our officers are healthy both physically and mentally. And when they are so, they treat our community better, and we have them for longer periods of time. So those are a quick overview of our 9 priorities as a police department going in to 2021. what we're going to continue to build on are successes. And the regional collaboration will continue into 21. It's going to get even greater. We have over 60 agencies now participating in our Indianapolis Violence Reduction Partnership. That partnership has led to arrests not only in Indianapolis for violent offenders, but in all of our donut counties because of their participation in that. We know that our Shauna Majors and her group are building upon the information that comes out of that to help guide their efforts as well. That's a new addition in 2021. And then I can't speak enough about our Crime Gun Intelligence Center. This is really turning into a regional approach to not only fighting gun violence, but also identifying straw purchasers of weapons and processing weapons the same way, all in central Indiana, so that we get strong, robust prosecutions of people who commit crimes while armed with a gun that they're not supposed to have. And announced today that the Indiana State Police will be joining the Crime Gun Intelligence Center in 2021, adding additional resources to an already great project. They seized over 288 firearms last year and arrested over 302 criminals, violent criminals. Each one of their targets in the Crime Gun Intelligence Center has a nexus to violent crime one way or the other. They've been engaged some way or some fashion in at least 2 incidents of gun violence, and that's why they became a target of the Crime Gun Intelligence Center. We'll continue to do that work in partnership with the ATF, our partners at the Marion County Prosecutor's Office and the United States Attorney's Office. Some of the other changes that we're going to make as an agency, last year we were caught up in a lot of things that none of us expected in the first year of Chief Taylor's tenure as a chief of police. A lot of that was a distraction to some of the things that I know Chief Taylor wanted to make happen in our agency. And so in 2021, we're going to make that happen. We're going to reorganize some of our divisions and bureaus. First and foremost, we're going to create a standalone emergency management bureau, Homeland Security section. We found out clearly as we brought all of our partners together to mitigate the issues related to COVID that we needed to be more focused on emergency management here in Marion County. The folks at the Homeland Security Bureau now, Commander Sellis and his team, along with our partners, IFD, IEMS, Marion County Health Department, did a fantastic job. But what we found was that we need to have a person engaged in that kind of planning, mitigation, response, and recovery to man-made and natural disasters 24/7, and that's what we're going to do going forward. We're going to move the community affairs section of community engagement section from the training academy. We're going to put it under the office of the chief, and we're going to do more with them in 2021 to help engage the community in our crime fighting efforts. We're going to do a little bit of reorganizing in the investigation division, create 2 different bureaus, one that focuses on the more reactive type of investigation and one on the more proactive type of investigation. Your Crime Gun Intelligence Center, your proactive narcotics investigations, your drug trafficking organization investigations, and then the more traditional reactive type of crimes like homicide, robbery, and aggravated assault. Next. And then finally, moving forward as a community, we have to look at our operations as a whole. One of the things that NYU, our partners, have shown us in their analysis of our runs is that about 44% of the time our officers are engaged in activity that's not criminal related, or doing activities in the community that take them away from their ability to be proactive in crime. It was clear that from their statistics, we are a reactive police department. We have to become more proactive in the future. And part of that is going to be looking at the types of runs and how we respond to certain types of runs and crimes, and seeing how we can reduce our officers' time dealing with those things. For instance, most of our over 95% of our alarms are false alarms. Our officers spend a lot of time taking non-injury vehicle crashes, respond to a lot of issues related to things that really don't meet the level of where we should be sending our officers, therefore taking them out of the beats and out of the areas where they should be present and dealing proactively with some of the violent crime. So the ways we're going to do that is that we have open civilian positions to help respond to vehicle crashes and to take telephone reports. We're going to be implementing an online self-reporting tool where citizens in the community can report crimes that happen, vehicle larceny with no suspects. They can do that with themselves online without having to wait for an officer to come to their house to do that. Much more to talk about. I could talk all day, but I won't. I know the mayor has other important things to do. So with that, I'm complete.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Bailey. We'll now move to the question and answer portion of the public safety update. As usual, we'll have reporters put their name and station in the Q&A box down at the bottom right corner, and then we'll get to them one by one. We expect to get to quite a few today, so if you're not read off right away, please be patient. We'll start off with Abdul Hakim Shabazz.
Mr. Mayor, good morning. Question for you: with all the efforts with crime prevention with the police, how confident are you that any of this is actually going to work? Because we just saw another record number of homicides, 214, the most in the city's history. What guarantee, or can you tell the voters or the citizens or anyone that this is actually going to work and going to be different than previous years where we've seen our murder rates just go up and up and up?
Well, Abdul, I have great confidence in Impd, the command staff, the rank and file, in working together with the community to not only improve community relationships with our police department, which I think will go a long way toward helping us resolve many of these issues. But the fact that you were just presented what I consider to be an honest and authentic assessment by the leadership of Impd, with the courage to acknowledge what we're doing right and what we need to improve on. These are career professionals who lead Impd. I have the utmost faith and confidence in their leadership. 2020 was a tough year in many respects. And to reiterate a comment that I made in my opening remarks, Indianapolis was not alone. In fact, every major urban area throughout the country, unfortunately in 2020, saw a dramatic uptick in the number of criminal homicides cities experienced and the number of non-fatal shootings, while at the same time overall crime continues to go down. So we're going to focus like a laser this year. I'm glad that we are partnering with the NYU School of Law Criminal Justice Lab. I think that those efforts will bear fruit, and I am confident that our numbers at the end of this year will show marked success in the initiatives that have been outlined to you today.
Thank you. Next up is Steve Jefferson of WTHR.
Yes, while investigating fatal and non-fatal shootings, what has been the most common denominator or issue among those incidents for you to address and possibly reduce gun violence?
I'll take that one, and anybody else can jump in. That's a tough one, Steve, because there's some we just don't know. It's probably more close to 60 or 70% now of our non-fatal shooting victims are not cooperative. They either give us false information about what happened, or this just don't give us any information, flat out don't cooperate. From a homicide standpoint, the ones we know about, there's a lot that are conflictual in nature, which makes it difficult for law enforcement to predict that they're going to happen in the spur of the moment and heat of the moment. We see a lot of instances where people are shot as a part of a robbery. That's why Chief Barker talked earlier about how important we continue to push robberies down, is because we see less of those type of incidents. But that's really a tough one, especially on the non-fatal shooting side, is because people fail to cooperate. but we see, anecdotally, I can tell you that drug trafficking, drug dealing, both from some of the hard narcotics like heroin and fentanyl and cocaine, but a lot of times surrounding marijuana as well. That's a quick answer. It's a difficult question to answer, Steve.
Could I jump in? Just a couple things with that, and it's anecdotally also, but we're seeing a lot of conflict, a lot of mental health stress on people. A lot of our returning citizens, the jobs they were able to get or keep, where a lot of those were in hospitality, and that has created yet another burden on people. And so we're seeing the need for money as a lot of what we're seeing through the drug trade. Also, just social media beef as usual. A lot of, that structure of, especially for the young people, school is not in its traditional sense. And so people are just handling things in an inappropriate way. And I think my advice to people listening is get involved. And what I mean by that is, if you know you're a parent and you know your kid or your young person is involved in some illegal or highly violent activity, say something, talk them out of it. We can't keep just encouraging this bad behavior to end the conflict so permanently. So those are the couple of things I wanted to add for you, Steve.
Thank you, Shona. Next up, we have Russ Mcquaid of Fox 59.
And good morning. Shona, the chief, and Chris, or the mayor, all of you may want a part of this. First of all, do we know why Johnny Purchase was killed? Second of all, Shona, you described the work of interrupters, quote, as dangerous. And third, for the mayor, considering we've lost a community leader in the fight against violence, how would you convince the community to step up to the plate and to take charge of that and to voluntarily come forward when all they got to do is look at Mr. Purchase's murder and Shona's description of the work that her interrupters do and go, I'm not getting involved in this.
Russ's first question.
Sorry, Mayor, you're muted. Who did you say for the first?
No, I said, does someone want to address Russ's first question, the circumstances surrounding Mr. Purchase's death?
I could take that if you don't mind, Chief. Mr. Purchase was working for one of our community partners and was out simply canvassing the community and leaving flyers on doors about the resources available to that community. From what I understand, the person inside was expecting trouble at the door, and it just so happens that it was Mr. Johnny putting a flyer on the door to just let that community know about the resources available at the community center. So that's what happened.
And Russ, if I could chime in on what we do with the community. So yesterday when we were at the vigil for Mr. Purchase, his name didn't ring a bell for me initially, but when I saw the picture of him, I realized that this is a man who'd been out there doing the work for a while. I've come across him a few times. And there's other people in the community that do that. Unfortunately, when you're in a war, you may lose a battle or two in there, but that doesn't keep us and other community members from feeling a need to participate in that. And fortunately, we don't have that type of violence happen to people that are trying to better the community. That's not a common theme, but we do know there are people out there that care for this community and want to make things happen. And I believe more and more will continue to step up as we try to get a grip on what's going on.
Yeah, and as a final matter, Russ, in answer to your question, look, the work of the interrupters is extraordinarily dangerous. And as the chief said, yesterday's vigil reminded all of us that these interrupters are putting their life in harm's way from time to time. And sadly, Mr. Purchase paid the ultimate price. But one thing about that vigil yesterday that at least struck me is the fact that the work that Mr. Purchase died in doing is critically important. And the people that were gathered there were gathered to re-emphasize that we cannot let Mr. Johnny's life go in vain, and that we need to redouble our efforts and recommit ourselves collectively as a community, particularly in our support of those who will do this critical work, Shauna and her department. Yes, it was a sad day, and there was a loss of life. But I can tell you that the overwhelming number of people who attended yesterday's vigil, rather than say throw up our hands and give up, is certainly not the sentiment that was expressed. In fact, the sentiment expressed was, let's make sure Mr. Johnny's light goes even farther and even deeper into the community. And help save our young people from the darkness that all too often surrounds them.
Thanks, Mayor. Next up is Stephanie Wade of WRTV.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for doing this today. When you're reflecting on 2020, where do we go next? I know Assistant Chief Bailey, he laid out a lot of this, but what did we learn? What do we do? What do we need to prioritize the most in this COVID era, especially after coming off of the record-breaking homicide year?
I can take a little bit of that. So I think I mentioned it before, 2020 was certainly a year of firsts, not just for the community, but for the police department and really the globe. So I think notwithstanding what Chief Bailey pointed out as far as specific strategy items moving into 2021, I think our primary focus right now is figuring out how to do that safely with our workforce, given the existing COVID restrictions. That's one of the things we learned was in 2020, as the entire nation shuts down to face a global pandemic, how can we adjust our policing strategy to still fulfill the basic services, but also be transparent to communities' expectations and still hit that mark? It made us a much more streamlined police department. I can tell you that. It forced us to take a look at longstanding practices, just with regards to things like, traditionally having all investigators and all officers in a brick and mortar building at all times to investigate, to work on that casework when they're not in the field, to be available for in-person meetings. That it allowed us to take a long look at things that are quite probably outdated with our practices to make us a more agile police department. And I think we've seen some benefits to looking at how we do day-to-day operations. I think keeping those things in mind as we move forward with the strategy items outlined today, we are in a different space today at the beginning of 21 than we were at the beginning of 20, because we've learned so much about the capabilities that exist within our own department when you look at how we've updated our day-to-day operations. So, the safety of our officers is obviously paramount as we continue to roll out these crime fighting strategies. And then hand in hand with that is the safety of our community being as equally paramount, and to make sure that those strategies maintain the focus and what we're trying to accomplish with our operational capability, but making sure at all costs that we are constantly involved in those conversations to say, okay, this is the strategy we put into place. Let's quickly examine what that impact was, adjust our resources accordingly, and then redeploy as a direct result of that ongoing community two-way communication.
And Stephanie, let me add to what Chief Barker just laid out. You know, all too often in giving these honest assessments of what went right, what went wrong in the past year, and how we are embarking on a strategy to make adjustments so that we don't experience the same level of violence. We all too often forget that the changes that we have been making over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years are making a real difference. In other words, we focus on what's wrong, which is what we should be focusing on, or what isn't going well, and we don't focus as much time and energy and attention on the changes that have been made that are, I think, going to have a transformative effect for public safety generally in the community. For example, the Community Justice Campus, which I think will be, for the next several decades, a transformative asset for public safety. We just recently opened up the Assessment and Intervention Center to redirect those who are struggling with mental health or addiction to different options. Police officers tell me all the time that they need more options. They need more opportunities to resolve conflict and not limit it to just either arresting or not arresting. The changes that we've made in providing IMPD with more resources each and every year in our budget so that they can expand, for example, to a full staffing level and to return to community-based beat policing, I think will continue to have. It has had a positive change thus far, and will continue to have a positive change, as was said earlier, in helping IMPD become more proactive and less reactive. I think Chief Bailey was making those points. The MCAP program and the BHU program that was mentioned in the presentation. We need to expand both of those efforts to help people who are in crisis get resources. We've enhanced transparency by rolling out a comprehensive body-worn cameras program. And frankly, as was mentioned, the changes to our general orders and use of force review boards, creating a civilian presence, I think will go a long way toward encouraging the residents of the city of Indianapolis to be confident in the transparency in which IMPD operates. And as a final matter, we are funding at historic levels the community-based violence prevention organizations more than ever before, with a more coordinated and data-driven approach. Those changes are making a difference. And while 2020 was the most difficult year our city has ever experienced, while 2020 was the most difficult year our country has ever experienced, I think IMPD is rededicated to, as Chief Barker just mentioned, learning the lessons of 2020, hopefully overcoming the effect of the pandemic, and therefore, with a focused effort, make 2021 a much safer year for all of the residents of Indianapolis.
Thanks, Mayor. Our next question is from Russ Dodge of WITT.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And I think this is more geared towards Shauna from your remarks. Talked about the extra cameras coming from business. Actually, two questions here. So besides the downtown area, talk about other areas that might be getting cameras from businesses. It seems like it's a helpful idea. Then also you mentioned about the extra presence from 8:30 to 1 a.m. on Saturday in the Circle Center Mall area and the Canal area. And clearly, the data will show that, particularly in the Canal area, there's been a lot of violence after 1 a.m. So my question is 8:30 to 1 a.m. on Saturday enough, or really should you be looking at planning to extend that to 3 a.m. And have it on Friday and Saturday night?
The first one, the camera issue, is not one for Shauna to answer, but yeah, the B-Link program is available to businesses all throughout the city that want to be part of that program. And, we'll make sure that link to that website to see how you can sign up for that gets out there. But we're also looking at ways to expand our own internal crime camera, neighborhood camera systems as we speak. And working with city technology to expand those programs to other areas so that when our officers aren't there, we at least have some sort of presence in the neighborhood that everybody knows that there's the potential they're going to get caught on camera committing crime if they do it. The rest of the stunts. Oh, go ahead, Kendall.
On B-Link. So to further amplify that question a little bit, downtown is certainly important to the viability in the city of Indianapolis, but the neighborhoods are also important, and we're engaged in constant discussion with neighborhood groups and others to provide potential seed money for these neighborhoods to invest in the B-Link program. And we're happy to say that there are a number of communities that are considering that as they look at crime prevention plans for their particular neighborhood. And we hope that those efforts will materialize over this year as different neighborhood groups look to join the B-Link program.
And so finally, about Safe Summer, that Saturday night and those Friday nights are dedicated to our youth. We don't necessarily patrol the bar age, the older age. That's why we stop at 1, because that's curfew. But we are working with the downtown Impd district with Commander Burton. And as this summer approaches, each summer we kind of look at the time slots and where we're needed. So as this summer approaches, we will continue to have that conversation to see if we need to extend the hours or push them back and where we're needed. I think also it was mentioned today about the ambassadors and the cadets that have been added to the public safety downtown effort. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Shauna. Our next question is from Justin Mack of IndyStar.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This question for Assistant Chief Bailey, but also for Chief Taylor as well. Assistant Chief Bailey, you mentioned the distractions that kind of prevented IMPD from getting to or starting some of the initiatives that you wanted to do in Chief Taylor's first year. Hoping you could speak to more about what those distractions were and how IMPD plans to stay focused in 2021, because I expect a lot more distractions. This year's already started off pretty distracting. So how do we focus when new distractions are on the way and put those plans in place that you hope to roll out to the rest of the city?
Well, I mean, obviously in our job, there's always particular distraction, but this year's been, particularly hard, COVID especially. We spent a lot of the time in March and April and even May trying to figure out how we keep our workforce healthy and how we limit interactions with the community so that we keep our community healthy. And that right there is a negative thing in the policing industry when you lose the contact with the community, the people that you are sworn to protect, the ones that you rely on to do your job each and every day. That's going to have an impact on some of the things that you want to do. We lost Bree. We had months upon months of reckoning with issues related to law enforcement reform that we spent time redoing general orders and lots of other things that took up a lot of other time. And while we were still constantly focused on the violence, making the wholesale, systematic, organization-wide changes that we needed to make just didn't happen in a year that was full of other things to deal with. And so we started thinking about it late in the year about what 2021 looks like. We engaged more heavily from the police department standpoint with NYU on their analysis of our data, and now we're moving forward with those changes we think make sense after we've had a chance to step back and look at it and take a breath a little bit. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and in addition, you know, I'll be honest, I love people. I like to be out there with them. COVID did set us back with the inability to really meet as what I would have liked to have done last year. But there are some options. You know, I have met with people through WebEx and Zoom and those things. But I'm hoping that things will open up a little bit, whether I have to do it by wearing a mask and being, you know, practicing good precautions. I do want to be out there and listen to the people. And I've had a number of people, even when I go out, you know, to work out with my mask on, people do approach and they have suggestions on things. And we want to hear those things and implement them where we can. A lot of those suggestions have had to do with meeting with the youth. And you know, that's important. We have, you know, our police athletic league that, you know, has had to go through some changes too, because, you know, kids aren't in school and you can't necessarily meet with them. And that's, I believe that's hurt, but I think that's also going to open up, and we just have to find other options on making sure we're carrying on those conversations, especially with our young folks and helping them through the difficult times of just life in general.
Thanks, Chief. Those were all the questions that I saw. If folks want to stay tuned, we will be sharing the presentation, the slide deck, after the press conference is over. And feel free to reach out to myself or contacts for OPHS or Impd if you have any questions. I expect there will be a number of stories based off of what was talked about today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.